The voice in the dark. The voice that wasn't human. I have often wondered whether a place can remember the people who enter it. Not in the sentimental way. Old houses seem to hold laughter in their walls, or churches carry prayers long after the faithful have gone. I mean something colder than that. Something patient. Something that listens without breathing, and keeps a record of every footstep, every whisper, every mistake. That was what North Brother Island felt like the first time I saw it from the water. It was not beautiful. Not exactly. The moon had turned the East River into a sheet of restless black glass, and beyond it the island rose like a dead thing, half buried in mist. Trees grew through the bones of old buildings. Windows stared without glass. Walls leaned into the dark, as if they had been waiting for someone foolish enough to return. There were 3 of us that night. Marcus was the loudest, the kind of man who laughed whenever silence became too honest. He had a wide grin, restless hands, and a talent for making every terrible idea sound like destiny. Julian was quieter, sharper, always watching from behind tired eyes. He had suffered more than he admitted, though none of us said that aloud. And then there was me. My name is Ethan. At the time, I was 23 studying history and trying to finish a thesis on abandoned institutions, quarantine, hospitals, forgotten wards, places where society once locked away the sick, the unwanted, and the inconvenient. North Brother Island had become the obsession at the center of my work. A forbidden patch of ruin in the middle of New York City. A place close enough to see, but unreachable in every way that mattered. We were not supposed to go there. That should have been enough to stop us. But youth has a strange way of confusing fear with invitation. We launched the kayaks from the Bronx, a little after 2 in the morning. The city behind us still glowed with its restless electric life, but the river swallowed its noise almost immediately. With every stroke of the paddle, the world we knew became smaller, dimmer, less convincing. Marcus was ahead of us, whispering curses at the current. Julian followed behind me, his paddle cutting the water with soft, careful movements. "You're still sure about this?" Julian asked. His voice sounded strange over the river. Too thin. Too easily carried away. "No," I said. "But I'm already wet." Marcus turned his head and grinned. "That's the spirit." We reached the island after what felt like an hour, though it could not have been more than 15 minutes. Pulling the kayaks onto shore was harder than expected. The reeds were thick, clawing at our legs. Mud sucked at our shoes. Somewhere in the brush, something rustled once, then went still. "Rats," Marcus said quickly. No one answered. The moment we stepped inland, the city disappeared. That is the detail I remember most clearly. Not the buildings, not the darkness, not even the fear that came later. It was the impossible silence. The Bronx was less than a mile away, yet it felt as if we had crossed into a different century. The air smelled of salt, wet leaves, rust, and old stone. The trees had grown wild and twisted their branches, folding over the paths like fingers laced in prayer. Our flashlights caught pieces of the island in broken fragments, a cracked wall, a collapsed roof, a doorway filled with vines, a sign so faded that only a few letters remained. Everything man made seemed ashamed of itself, sinking slowly beneath moss and shadow. "This is insane," Marcus whispered. For once he sounded sincere. We walked deeper. The first building we entered had once been some kind of administrative structure. At least that was my guess. The rooms were small and square, with peeling paint hanging from the walls like dead skin. There were old tiles under our feet, many of them broken. The ceiling had collapsed in places, leaving piles of plaster and blackened wood across the floor. Julian moved carefully, his flashlight steady. Marcus, on the other hand, behaved as if the building existed specifically for his entertainment. He kicked at debris, opened doors, laughed when hinges screamed. "Imagine being stuck here," he said. "Sick abandoned, nobody coming." "That happened to a lot of people," I replied. The words came out colder than I intended. Marcus looked back at me. For a moment, his grin faded. "Right," he said. "Sorry, Professor." We continued through the building, passing room after room. Some were empty. Some held rusted bed frames. In one room, the wall had been covered in graffiti layers of names and symbols written by people who had clearly come before us. That should have comforted me. Proof that others had entered and left. Instead, it made me feel worse. Because beneath the old spray paint near the corner of the floor, Marcus found something fresh. A half-empty can of black spray paint. He picked it up and shook it. The marble inside rattled softly. "Well," he said, "looks like we're not the first geniuses tonight." Julian frowned. How new is it? Marcus sprayed a short line across the floor before I could stop him. The paint came out, wet and dark. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Marcus lowered the can. That's probably fine, he said. But his voice had changed. I looked around the room again. The graffiti no longer felt like evidence of past trespassers. It felt like warning marks. Like people had been writing on the walls not to leave their names but to prove they had existed there. We should stay together, Julian said. He was right. Of course he was right. But fear had not fully reached us yet. Not real fear. Only unease. The kind that sharpens the senses but still leaves room for arrogance. A few minutes later in the larger hospital building, we split apart. It happened so naturally that no one questioned it. Marcus had found another wall covered in graffiti and wanted to photograph it. Julian stayed with him, checking something on his camera. I moved down a nearby hallway to look at what I thought might have been an old ward. I'll be right there, I told them. Don't get eaten, Marcus said. His voice echoed behind me as I walked away. The hallway was long and narrow, with doors on both sides. My flashlight beam moved over cracked walls, fallen plaster, empty rooms. Some doors were missing. Others hung crookedly from their hinges. Every step I took made the floor groan beneath me. At first I could still hear Marcus and Julian behind me, their low voices, the occasional scrape of a shoe. Then I could not. The silence returned so completely that I stopped walking. Guys, no answer. I told myself the walls were thick. I told myself they had gone outside. I told myself many things, all of them reasonable, all of them useless. Then I heard Julian call my name. Ethan. It came from ahead of me. Not behind. Ahead. I froze. The voice was unmistakable. Julian's soft, careful tone. The faint tiredness at the edge of every word. It had come from somewhere farther down the hallway, beyond the reach of my flashlight. Julian, I called. Abhause. Then, from a room on the left, in here, my skin tightened. For Julian to be ahead of me, he would have had to leave Marcus' circle through another part of the building and reach that room before I did. It was possible. Buildings like that were full of strange routes, connecting corridors, broken staircases. Possible, yes, but wrong. Something about it was wrong. Still, I walked toward the room. That is the part I hate remembering. The obedience of it. The way I followed the voice, simply because it sounded like someone I loved. The doorway was darker than the hall. My flashlight seemed weaker when I aimed it inside, as if the room absorbed light instead of receiving it. Julian. No reply. I stepped in. The smell hit me first. Damp plaster, rotten wood, something metallic underneath. But there was another scent too faint and warm, almost animal. Not death, not sewage. Something living but not cleanly alive. I swept the flashlight across the room. An old cabinet, a cracked sink, a chair overturned near the wall. Then the beam reached the far corner. Someone was standing there, facing the wall. For one impossible second, my mind tried to make the figure into Julian. It needed to. It fought desperately to arrange the shape into something familiar. But Julian was not that tall. No one was that tall. The figure stood with its back to me, shoulders narrow, arms hanging too low at its sides. Its head was slightly bowed, almost touching the peeling wall. It wore something dark and shapeless, or perhaps that was only shadow clinging to it. I could not see its face. I did not want to. My breath stopped in my throat. Then, without turning around, the figure spoke, in Julian's voice. "You came!" I screamed. The sound tore out of me before I could stop it. The figure twitched. Not a full movement, only a small reaction, as if delighted by the noise. I ran. I do not remember deciding to run. One moment I was in the room, and the next I was crashing into the hallway, slipping on dust, slamming my shoulder against a doorframe, shouting Marcus's name, Julian's name, any name that belonged to the living. Behind me, something moved. Not fast. That was worse. It stepped into the hallway slowly, as if it knew I could not truly escape. I heard one footstep, then another. Heavy, patient. I found Marcus and Julian near the entrance of the building. They had heard me screaming and were already moving toward me, their faces pale in the flashlight glare. "What happened?" Marcus shouted. "Run," I said. What run? Maybe it was my face. Maybe it was the sound behind me. Whatever the reason, they did not argue. We ran through the hospital, down broken corridors, past rooms full of darkness, over roots and fallen stone. Branches whipped against my arms when we burst outside. My lungs burned. The island seemed to twist around us, every path, unfamiliar, every building watching. We did not stop until we reached the kayaks. Marcus bent over, gasping. Julian looked at me with terror already forming in his eyes. "What did you see?" he asked. I tried to answer, but my mouth was too dry. Finally, I managed. "I heard you." Julian stared at me. "What?" "I heard your voice. Down the hallway. You told me to come into a room." His expression changed. Not confusion. Fear. "Ethan," he said slowly. "I was with Marcus the whole time." Marcus nodded. He never left me. The river moved quietly behind us. The reeds whispered. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then, from somewhere deep within the abandoned hospital, Julian's voice called out again. Clear, gentle, almost amused. "Ethan." Julian was standing right beside me when we heard it, and this time all three of us screamed. The thing that learns. The voice that wasn't human. For several seconds after the voice called my name from inside the hospital, none of us moved. The sound had not echoed unnaturally. That was the worst part. It had sounded human, warm, gentle, exactly like Julian. Beside me, Julian's face had gone completely pale. His flashlight trembled slightly in his hand, the beam shaking across the reeds and broken concrete near the shoreline. Marcus was the first to speak. "No," he whispered. "No, absolutely not." Another silence followed. Then from somewhere deeper inside the island, we heard movement. Not running, not chasing, just footsteps. Slow, measured, crunching softly over debris. Something was walking through the hospital ruins toward us. Marcus grabbed his kayak immediately. "We're leaving," he said. "Now." None of us argued. We dragged the kayaks toward the water with frantic, clumsy movements. My hands kept slipping against the wet plastic. The reeds seemed thicker now, wrapping around our ankles like fingers trying to hold us in place. Behind us, the island remained silent again. Too silent. The kind of silence that feels deliberate. Julian shoved his kayak halfway into the river before suddenly stopping. "Wait." Marcus turned sharply. "What?" My paddle. "What about it?" "It's gone." We all looked down. The paddle Julian had left beside the shoreline only minutes earlier had disappeared. Marcus laughed nervously. "You dropped it somewhere." "No," Julian said. "I left it right here." His voice was tight now, controlled but only barely. We searched the mud with our flashlights. Nothing. The reeds shifted softly in the wind, and then from behind us we heard Marcus's voice say, "Guys." Marcus froze beside me, because he had not spoken. The voice had come from somewhere inland, farther up the beach. Exactly Marcus's voice. Same tone, same roughness, same nervous laugh hidden beneath the word. Every hair on my body rose at once. Julian slowly turned his flashlight toward the darkness beyond the trees. Nothing. Only black branches moving against darker sky. Marcus whispered, "Don't answer it." The island seemed to breathe around us. Then the voice came again. Closer. "Guys." This time it sounded wrong somehow. Not distorted, not monstrous. Just slightly delayed, as though whoever spoke had learned the sound by listening rather than understanding. Marcus backed toward the water. "We're leaving the paddle, but there are only two. I don't care." He practically shoved his kayak into the river. That was when we realized the current had changed. The water near the shore had become strangely violent, crashing against the rocks harder than before. One of the kayaks twisted sideways, immediately nearly flipping over. "What the hell?" Marcus muttered. The river had been calm minutes ago. Now it looked black and furious beneath the moonlight. And then Julian pointed silently toward the hospital. At first I saw nothing. Then movement. A figure standing between the trees near the broken entrance. Too tall. Perfectly still. Watching us. Even at that distance, I knew it was the same thing I had seen in the room upstairs. Its body looked almost human beneath the darkness. Almost. But something about its proportions felt unfinished. Its arms hung too low, its neck bent at a strange angle, and though I could not see its face clearly, I knew it was looking directly at us. None of us breathed. Then the figure tilted its head slowly to one side, and in Julian's voice, it said Ethan. Marcus swore loudly. Julian stumbled backward into the water. The figure took one step forward, then another. Not fast, never fast. Like it already knew we belonged to it eventually. Go, Marcus screamed. We pushed the kayaks into the river recklessly. Water splashed into my shoes as I climbed in. My fingers shook so badly I nearly dropped the paddle. Behind us, branches snapped softly beneath slow approaching footsteps. I dared one final glance toward shore. The figure had stopped at the edge of the reeds. Moonlight touched part of its body now, enough for me to realize its clothes were not clothes at all. They looked wet, like strips of black fabric fused against pale skin. And its face, God. Its face was changing. The features moved subtly, uncertainly, like wax trying to remember the shape of a person. One side resembled Julian. The other did not resemble anything human. I turned away instantly and paddled harder. The river swallowed us. For several minutes, none of us spoke. The only sounds were splashing water and our ragged breathing. The island drifted farther behind us, shrinking slowly into darkness. Yet even as distance grew between us and the shore, I could still feel something watching, listening, learning. Marcus finally broke the silence. What the hell was that thing nobody answered? Because none of us truly wanted to say it aloud. The city lights ahead looked strangely unreal, now glowing softly through fog like another world entirely. Safety no longer felt certain. The island had changed something inside us before we had even escaped it. Then Julian stopped paddling. I looked back. He was staring at the water beside his kayak. Julian. He didn't answer. The river around him rippled strangely. Not from current, from movement underneath. Marcus noticed it too. Oh God. Something pale moved beneath the surface for only a second. Long, thin, human-shaped, then gone. Julian began paddling again, immediately harder than before. None of us looked into the water after that. By the time we reached the Bronx shoreline, dawn had begun bleeding weak gray light into the sky. The city slowly returned around us. Distant sirens, traffic, the hum of civilization awakening. But none of it felt comforting anymore. We loaded the kayaks into Marcus's truck without speaking much. Our silence no longer felt natural. It felt crowded, like there was another presence sitting between us, listening carefully to every breath. Marcus finally slammed the truck door shut. That thing followed us. Julian rubbed both hands over his face. No, he said quietly. No, it stayed on the island. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Marcus stared at him. How Julian hesitated too long. My stomach tightened. How Marcus repeated. Julian looked away toward the river. Because I think, he whispered, I think it wanted us to leave. The words settled over us like cold rain. Nobody spoke during the drive back to campus. The sunrise outside the window should have made everything feel ordinary again, but instead it only made the exhaustion worse. The world looked faded and colorless, like reality itself had become thin. When Marcus finally dropped me off outside my apartment building, he grabbed my arm before I could leave. You saw its face, right? I swallowed. Yes. What did it look like? I hesitated, because I had not fully admitted the truth to myself yet. It looked unfinished, I said quietly. Marcus stared at me for several seconds. Then he nodded once. Yeah, he whispered. That's what I saw too. I barely slept that morning. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the figure standing against the wall inside that dark room, motionless, waiting, and worst of all, wearing Julian's voice. By evening, I convinced myself exhaustion had amplified everything. Fear can reshape memory. That was the logical explanation. We had trespassed onto an abandoned island at 2 a.m. and scared ourselves half to death. The human brain fills darkness with monsters all the time. I repeated that thought constantly. It still did not help. Around midnight, my phone rang. Marcus. I answered immediately. Tell me you're awake, he said. His voice sounded wrong. Not copied. Afraid. I'm awake. What happened, I think. Something's outside my apartment. Every nerve in my body tightened instantly. What I heard knocking about 10 minutes ago. I sat upright in bed. Did you look? No. Then, how do you know something's there? Marcus was silent briefly. Then he whispered. Because it keeps talking. My throat went dry. What's it saying? Another pause. When Marcus finally answered, his voice shook so badly, I barely recognized him. It sounds like my mother. A cold pressure spread through my chest. Marcus's mother had died 3 years earlier. Marcus. I know what her voice sounds like, Ethan. I could hear him breathing hard now. It keeps asking me to open the door. The line crackled softly. Then, faintly through the phone speaker, I heard it too. A woman's voice somewhere inside Marcus's apartment. Gentle. Patient. Marcus. My blood turned to ice. Do not open that door, I whispered immediately. I wasn't planning to. The voice came again. Closer this time. Marcus. Let me inside. He made a broken sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. That's not her, he whispered. That thing knows things. Then suddenly, another voice spoke through the apartment. My voice. Marcus. Perfectly mine. Exactly mine. I dropped the phone instantly. It hit the floor beside my bed with a sharp crack. For several seconds, I could only stare at it in horror. From the speaker, I could still hear Marcus breathing, and beneath it, faintly, my own voice speaking somewhere inside his apartment. Not angry, not threatening, almost curious, like it was practicing. It left the island, the voice that wasn't human. I picked up the phone with hands that no longer felt like my own. Marcus, I whispered. Listen to me. Get out of the apartment. For a moment there was only static breath, and the faint sound of something moving through rooms it did not belong in. Then Marcus said, I can't. Why? The door's open. My heart seemed to stop. From somewhere on his end of the line, my own voice spoke again. Marcus, don't be afraid. It was perfect. Not similar. Not close. Perfect. Every pause, every breath, every fragile shape of my voice had been stolen and placed into something that had no right to use it. Marcus began to cry quietly. I had never heard him cry before. Then the line went dead. I called back immediately. Once, twice, 10 times, nothing. By the time I reached his apartment, the sky outside was still black. Julian was already there, standing barefoot on the pavement, in a coat thrown over his shirt, his face pale and wet with rain. You heard it too, he asked. I nodded. Neither of us said what we feared. Marcus's door was not broken. It was open by 3 inches. Inside, every light was on. The apartment looked untouched at first. His jacket was over a chair. A glass of water sat on the table. His phone lay cracked on the floor beside the couch. But Marcus was gone. No blood. No signs of struggle. Only one thing. On the wall beside the bedroom door, written in black spray paint, were 4 words. It learns through love. Julian stepped back, as if the sentence had struck him. What does that mean? He whispered. I did not answer, because I already understood enough to be afraid. It had not copied random voices. It had copied the voices that could make us obey. A friend, a mother, ourselves. The thing from the island had followed the shape of our fear through the people we loved. We called the police. We lied badly. We said Marcus was missing, that we had found his door open, that he had been acting strange. They asked questions we could not answer. By morning, Julian and I were sitting on the curb outside the building, soaked through watching strangers walk in and out of Marcus's apartment with gloves and cameras. The world had continued. That felt obscene. Cars passed. People bought coffee. A woman walked a dog. Somewhere a child laughed. And Marcus was gone. Julian did not speak until the sun had risen above the rooftops. We have to go back. I turned to him. No. Ethan, it started there. And Marcus vanished here. Exactly. His eyes were red but steady. It followed us because we brought something back. Maybe it needs the island. Maybe Marcus is there. That's insane. So was everything else. I wanted to argue. I wanted to hate him for saying it. But grief has its own logic, and fear, when stretched far enough, becomes obedience. By dusk, we were back at the river. No jokes this time. No thrill. Only a terrible purpose. We stole the night again, paddling toward North Brother Island under a sky low with clouds. The city behind us looked farther away than before, as if it had already decided not to save us. The island waited in silence. We landed near the same reeds. Marcus's missing paddle was there, standing upright in the mud, like a grave marker. Julian made a sound in his throat. I gripped my flashlight until my knuckles hurt. From the hospital ruins, Marcus's voice called softly. "Guys." Julian closed his eyes. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." The voice came again. "Closer. Please. I'm hurt." It sounded exactly like him. The lazy humor was gone. This was Marcus stripped of pride, Marcus, afraid, Marcus begging. Julian took one step forward. I grabbed his arm. "That isn't him." He looked at me with a pain so raw, it made him seem older. "What if it is?" That was how the thing won. Not by strength, by doubt. We entered the hospital. Inside, the air was warmer than before. Damp heat clung to the walls. Our flashlights revealed new marks across the plaster, scratches, handprints, lines of black paint dragged along corridors like veins. Then we heard my voice from upstairs. "Julian." He flinched. Then Julian's voice answered from below us. "Ethan." We stopped. Two voices, both ours. Neither from our mouths. The building was full of us. Whispers moved through the rooms. Marcus laughing. Julian breathing. My own voice, saying fragments of sentences I remembered speaking on the river. "Don't answer it. We're leaving. I heard you." It had kept everything, every word, every fear. We found the staircase blocked by rubble, just as if the island itself had remembered old traps from older victims. We moved through a side corridor, instead deeper into the hospital, until we reached a stairwell leading down. The basement. Julian looked at me. Neither of us wanted to go first. We descended. The smell worsened, below wet concrete rust-old rot, and something living beneath it all. The basement corridor was lined with rooms whose doors had heavy locks on the outside. Quarantine cells, maybe. Isolation rooms. In the last room, we found Marcus. He was sitting against the wall. His head hung forward. His hands rested in his lap. "Marcus," Julian said. Marcus stirred. Slowly, he lifted his face. For one impossible second, relief almost destroyed me. He was alive. His face was bruised. His lips were cracked. His eyes were open and wet. "Don't let it talk," he whispered. Then something behind him spoke in my voice. Too late. The wall behind Marcus moved. No, not the wall. The darkness. A shape peeled itself from the corner, tall and pale and unfinished. Its body seemed made of borrowed pieces. Marcus's smile, Julian's posture, the angle of my head. Its face shifted as our flashlights trembled over, its features sliding gently beneath the skin like things floating under thin ice. Julian screamed. The thing smiled with Marcus's mouth. "Ethan," it said. Then it spoke in Julian's voice. "Help me." Then Marcus's mother. Then my voice again. "I want to go home." Marcus lunged forward suddenly and shoved Julian back. "Run!" The thing moved at last. Not slowly now. Fast. Too fast. It crossed the room in a pale blur and seized Marcus by the shoulder. He cried out, but he did not let go of Julian. He pushed him toward the door with everything he had. I grabbed Julian and dragged him into the hall. Marcus looked at me once. There was apology in his eyes. And then the door slammed shut between us. Inside the room, Marcus screamed. Julian tried to go back. I held him. He fought me like a wounded animal, sobbing, cursing, clawing at my arms. I held on because if I let him go, we would all die there. Then Marcus's scream stopped. A second later, his voice came through the door. Calm. Gentle. "Julian, it's okay now." Julian went still. His face collapsed. The voice continued. "I'm not scared anymore." I pulled him away. We ran. The hospital came alive around us. Doors slammed. Footsteps chased us from corridors that should have been empty. Voices called from every direction. Marcus ahead. Marcus behind. Marcus crying beneath the floor. Julian stumbled twice. I dragged him up both times. We burst from the building into rain. The storm had swallowed the island. Trees bent violently in the wind. The river was black and furious beyond the reeds. We reached the kayaks. Only one remained. Julian stared at it. Then he looked back at the hospital. From the entrance, Marcus stepped into view. Or what wore him. It had his body badly now, as if dressed in a person it had not fully learned. His shoulders hung wrong, his head tilted too far. But his face, God help me, his face was almost perfect. "Don't leave me," it said. Julian broke. He ran toward it. I screamed his name. He did not stop. The thing opened its arms. For one terrible heartbeat, Julian embraced Marcus. Then he looked over Marcus's shoulder at me and mouthed, "Go." The thing's smile widened. I pushed the kayak into the river and climbed in as the rain blinded me. Behind me, Julian screamed once. Only once. I paddled until my arms no longer felt attached to my body. I did not look back. I survived. That is the cruelest sentence I know. The police found no trace of Marcus or Julian. They found no kayak, no footprints that mattered, no proof of anything, except my trespassing, my panic, and my impossible story. People decided grief had broken me. Maybe they were right. Years have passed since that night, but I still cannot sleep in silence. I keep radios playing, fans humming, anything to stop the dark from becoming too empty. Because sometimes just before dawn, when the world is gray and fragile, I hear Marcus laughing in the next room. Sometimes Julian whispers my name from the hallway. And once last winter, I woke to my own voice speaking from the foot of my bed. It said, "I'm getting better." I did not move. I did not breathe. In the mirror across from me, my reflection was smiling. I was not. Whatever lived on that island did not want to kill us. It wanted to become us. And I think after all these years, it finally knows how.